Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective, part 4 of Never Bring Ignorance to a Debate, dissecting the Larry Elders interview on the Breakfast Club. But before we continue, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. We have been dissecting this interview. It's all over YouTube. And of course, depending upon what side of the political aisle you're on, you praise it or condemn it. What I want to do, and what I've been doing, is pulling apart some of Larry Elder's talking points, while at the same time criticizing some of the Breakfast Club inability to respond to his talking points. And so that's why I titled it Never Bring Ignorance to a Debate. There is a reason why Larry Elders went on the Breakfast Club, because, in my opinion, I think he knew it would have been an easy win for him. Because you spew out facts or numbers or stats that people cannot refute because they're not focusing on it. And that is the methodology of Larry Elders. He will corral the thoughts. He will focus your thoughts on certain issues. Now, at the same time, people are not necessarily aware of his tactics, that his primary purpose is to defend white people. It's to deflect from the evils of white people, of what they've done, while at the same time demonizing black people. In other words, black people are in the condition that they're in because of their own inadequacy, not because of what white people have done. He skews away from dealing with the pertinent issues that would say, okay, how do we balance it? Because there's criticism for both sides. There is criticism for black people in the present. But again, as I stated in some of the previous videos, you're only talking about a segment of the black community, which conservatives paint with one large brush. In other words, when they talk about black on black crime, they speak as if that is the entire black community. Of course, Larry, you are black, so unless you pride yourself on being one of the good ones, and he does, okay? So, so he's running for president. He's a conservative and a Republican. He's running for president. So the question is, why is he going on the Breakfast Club? Larry is never going to win the presidency. So at best, could we say that maybe he's hoping to get a seat at the table? But that's a stretch. Trump is never going to offer Larry Elders a seat at his table. So why is he even running for the presidency? Now, let me also say this. Well, you know what? Let's pick back up where we left off in the interview. Now, I'm going slow with this because I want to take apart and dissect all of his talking points. And that's why it seems like, yes, that I'm starting and stopping, because he's saying a lot of stuff that need to be put in proper context, corrected, viewed correctly. So that's why I'm doing that, because oftentimes we don't do that. You see these interviews all over the whether it's conservative or progressive platforms, and they just spew out information and no one challenges them on it. So let's dissect what he is saying. Here we go.
Everything is black, 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 black with you. Black is wrong. Black people do this and black people do that. And when I asked you what white people do wrong, you said you're not worried about white people at all.
I'm talking about the damage, disproportionate damage going on in the black community. For example.
Okay, so what Charlemagne said was absolutely right. Larry doesn't care about what's going on in the white community because primarily and mostly Larry speaks to white audiences. In other words, the reason why he has been successful in demonizing black people is because he is speaking to white people about black people. That's his primary audience. Being on the Breakfast Club is an exception to the rule. Most of the time, he's speaking to white people. Such is the case with most black conservatives. When you see them on YouTube and you hear a lot of the nonsense that they spew, they are talking to white people about black people.
Look at these smash and grabs that are taking place in Los Angeles, where I live. There's a suburb called Glendale, where at a mall recently, a mob of 30 to 40 people, they had masks on, but one guy got popped. He was black, and I think most of those who were doing this were black. And in recent years and times, there have been a number of these in places like Chicago, places like New York. If I were involved in something like that, Charlemagne, I grew up with a dad, just as you're raising your own children. I would have been more afraid of my father than I would about the cops catching me. These kids are afraid of neither. They don't have a father in the home. Cops.
Now, let me address what he just said. So, you're talking about the recent, and I think if you watch the news, you'll see across a lot of the major cities, at the very least, you have these smash and grabs. So, you have a crowd, 30, 40, 50, whatever, of youth that will terrorize the city. They usually downtown areas, high-end stores. They're breaking windows, breaking doors, going in, breaking. They're the reason why they call it a smash and grab. A smash and grab is because they get in fairly quickly and then get out. So they're grabbing, and in some cases, I think they stole up to $300,000 worth of merchandise. Okay, now here's my question to Larry. How do you know that the group of people, that those group of people, and certainly all of them, have been raised in homes or living in homes with no fathers? How do you ascertain that? See, that's a labeling there. Now, what you have with these groups is that they communicate on Facebook. In a lot of cases, they may or may not even know each other. They just show up, and so they show up. It's foolish. We'll get to later how they should be dealt with, but they just show up. But my point is, how do you know that they're fatherless? And if you're saying that they are fatherless merely because of the actions, that's even more stupid. That's just plain stupid, because you have no way of knowing that. So if you're saying that bad behavior, that if a group of people, a single person or a group of person, that if the bad behavior is how you're able to determine that they don't have a father. So let's reverse it. So if they have a father, they won't have bad behavior. So my question then is that bad behavior, as Larry is putting it, only confined to black people? So what about other groups of people that have bad behavior? So for example, would you say, Larry, that the group of people on January 6th that stormed the Capitol building, were they fatherless? Would you say that? Of course he wouldn't say that. Of course. In fact, he probably is defending them as Trump is defending them, right? As conservatives are defending them. In other words, they're patriots. But I digress. But there was bad behavior, right? They stormed the Capitol, right? Thousands stormed the Capitol. By the way, the same method. You had social media. They assembled on a certain day, and in this case, instead of bum rushing, they marched and then bum rushed the Capitol. Fatherless people? No. So why am I saying that? How you demonize people, how you characterize people, and in this case, black people, it's only black people. And then, of course, he's saying that these black people are fatherless, which he absolutely has no data to support that.
Cops are demoralized. They're pulling back. Their manpower.
I'm going to back up because I want you to hear this, what he is saying here.
I grew up with a dad, just as you're raising your own children. I would have been more afraid of my father than I would about the cops catching me. These kids are afraid of neither. They don't have a father in the home. Cops are demoralized. They're pulling back. Their manpower is short. And as a result, you tell a bad guy you're less likely to be caught, convicted, incarcerated, crime goes up. They may be criminals, but they're not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the couple of things that need to be addressed. So let's hear what he said. First, he talks about the smash and grab crowd. Now, first and foremost, they need to be dealt with. A lot of them need to be arrested. They need to be arrested for damaging property. They need to be arrested for violence, okay? So the first and foremost, yes, they need to be arrested. As I said, it has nothing to do with fatherless homes. It has to do with stupid kids. Now, in some cases, arrest them. So let's ask the question, though, why aren't they being arrested? When you have across the country, and then, of course, different police departments, same crime, same actions, why aren't they being? Now, I'm going to go a step further and say, if you want to say these are democratically run cities, okay, yes. Because, yes, there is a ideology there that's dangerous. The new mayor of Chicago is expressing, to me, idiotic ideology. So his response to the crowds of people that were doing this smash and grab was, don't demoralize disenfranchise a group of people. And I criticized the same. I had the same criticism for the mayor of Chicago. How does he know that everyone that was involved in the smash and grab were from disenfranchised homes or communities? A lot of them weren't. A lot of them come from real nice middle class neighborhoods, two-parent homes. They're just kids who were doing stupid things, and to which appropriate action should be taken against them. Okay, but let's ask the other question. So, how come the police who were present in some cases, how come the police, how come they didn't, okay? How come they didn't address that? There was a particular incident that happened when you had a smash and grab. You had a couple that was visiting, and I believe it was around the Magnificent Mile, so the North Michigan Avenue, where a lot of high-end shops, and these kids were going up and down the streets being unruly. Okay, this couple got jumped. Now there was a black lady who ran to the police and tried to get the police to intervene. The police were watching the couple get mobbed. The police did nothing. Finally, the woman intervened and in a sense rescued the kids. And by that time, they got beat up. So let's ask the question: why didn't those cops get disciplined for that? Why didn't they intervene? Now let's go back to something that Larry said. He said the cops are demoralized, right? What does he mean by that? Well, the cops are being held accountable for their actions. Now he's twisting the fact that he's saying that the cops are being demoralized. Okay, well, so what they're being demoralized? So what they're being criticized? Okay, so what? Do this. Stick your tongue out and say sticks and stones may hurt me, but sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. Yes, it's silly. So he says that they're being demoralized, meaning they're being criticized. Yeah, people have cameras, and now they're catching their bad actions on cameras, and now they're being held accountable. But he said something worse. He said that the cops are drawing back. Now that's more serious. And the reason why is because if you're drawing back, that means you're not doing your job that you took an oath to do. So the question is, why are they? And there's a lot of factors that's involved with that. Some of the factors involve that these police departments are making statements. In other words, because they are being demoralized, we're going to show the public, right, that if we pull back, that crime is going to run rampant. You don't get to make that choice. And with the mayors and the police commissions, in other words, the stuff should start running downhill. If the police commissioner won't do anything, fire him. If the police commissioners cannot lean on their police captains, fire the police captains. In short, how about fire those bad police officers who are not doing their jobs, who are allowing innocent citizens to be brutalized and victimized, and then let's hire good cops who will do their jobs. One other thing, who's criticizing good cops? Who is saying to cops that are doing their jobs, well, regardless, you're bad, right? Who's doing that? Back in May, there was a promising, beautiful young cop who was just a week away from marching across the stage and receiving her master's degree. This happened here in Chicago. She was on her way home late night. She was followed by thugs who, in a botched robbery attempt, ended up gunning her down. Well, watch this. They found those cops. Now, they actually found the thugs within a couple of days, arrested them. Who's protesting that, right? Who's demoralizing the cops for finding those thugs, arresting those thugs who gunned down this beautiful, innocent woman? No one. So this idea that what Larry is saying is some of the worst, in my opinion. It is the worst. He said worse, too. He said worse things, by the way. He's criticized 12-year-old Tamir Rice when he got killed. In other words, it was his fault for playing with a gun, not the cops. So it kind of shows you the mentality of Larry Elders. But I digress. So the point is that if the cops, we go back to why crime happens in certain areas, it's because it's tolerated. It's tolerated. But let's put the blame on who's tolerating it, who's allowing it to happen. Let's put the proper blame. Let's continue.
When you say, what do white people do? I mean, this is a country that has struggled mightily to get over its historic racism. There was a civil war. There was a big civil rights movement. This is the only majority white country that's ever elected a black president, let alone...
Okay, now we need to address this. He says the country has struggled mightily to overcome its racism. That is true. That is correct. Why did you have to in a country who said this? This is in the Constitution. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, just a part, right? That statement is in the Constitution. Why would we have to have such a struggle with this self-evident truth, right? Why do we have to have that? And this is what Larry is deflecting from. See, when you start with 1619, with the landing of slaves, the first slaves, then 157 years later, we come to 1776. So those generations, right? 150 years of African slaves who were born on this soil. 1776, this was written. We broke away from England, drafted the Constitution with this statement in it. How do you draft this statement while you have slaves? When you say, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men. Well, how did the nation condition its people to have cognitive dissonance to ignore this? And this is very important to understand, because when we have this, we hold these truths. You can look at this and say, okay, these people, a very specific race of people, we don't consider as men and certainly created equal. The country had to be conditioned to think this way. They used three things, right, to condition America that blacks were inferior, that it was okay to have slavery. Well, one, they used the law, so the Constitution. They invented laws that were aimed specifically at African Americans. Two, they used science. So, for example, they said medically that blacks were inferior to whites in every way. Okay, there was a disease called dropmania, which means that if a slave, the urge for a slave to be free, to run away and be free, he was suffering a medical condition. That was a medical science. And then last, and certainly not least, but worse, was Christianity, where in the name of Christianity, you had certain white Americas, every denomination split over the issue of slavery because they said that God's will was for black people to be enslaved. God cursed black people with dark skin. And so with Christianity, with those three, you were able to condition American, both slaves and white Americans, slaves to accept their conditions, but also white Americans that this was okay to treat God's creation, people who were created in the image of God, we discount that and treat them as animals. Now, this is what Larry deflects from. And he tried to generalize it by saying, that slavery thing. And then, of course, we come to 1865, and then the bloodiest war fought to end slavery. Now, watch this. So did the hearts change during this time? Absolutely not. The hearts did not change. So what happens is that they begin to manipulate laws. Certain white people begin to manipulate laws. And ultimately they came up with the Jim Crow laws, which for the next 100 years, right, segregated. These laws were specifically aimed at black Americans. So now that brings us to 1965, after a hard fought civil rights struggle to end systematic racism. So the question we can now ask is, what was the impact of slavery? What was the impact of slavery? Nearly 400 years, what was the impact? What was the psychological, emotional, physical effect of slavery? And all three there were. This is what Larry fights so hard to comfort white people by deflecting away from the evils and the guilt of slavery. So that's why, but yet you want to say that black people, it's their fault. Okay, after 50 years, it's their fault. And even now, are there white people who are racist who are trying to, again, afflict black people? They have to change the laws, and there are other ways that they are attempting to do it. All right, here we go.
Re-elected a black president. The three biggest cities in America are New York, Chicago, LA. They all have black mayors, even though no city has a majority of black population. The president.
Let me stop. He says that, and he's going to make this absurd claim that simply that the fact that America elected a black president meant that there was no racism. Well, that's absurd, because people like Larry and white people who are on Larry's side of the political aisle didn't vote for or supported Barack Obama during his 8-year term. Okay, so you still had to fight against people who actively tried to destroy him. White supremacy groups skyrocketed to some 800% starting in the presidency of Barack Obama. So so all of this stuff. Now then he says the major cities. Now he's actually going to bring up some good points with this. However, okay, when he says that the three major cities are run by black mayors, I'll come back to that point because that is a good point, but I'll come back to that point later in the clip.
President of Harvard is a black female. Martin Luther King in 1966, Charlemagne, gave an interview to the BBC. This is 2 years after the Civil Rights Act of 64 got passed. And he said, I'm amazed at how many positive changes there have been in America in the last 2 years. Why, if things keep going like this, we could have a black president in about 40 years' time. Mm-hmm. Do the math. Right on cue, Barack Obama elected 2008. He didn't say there'll be a black female president of Harvard, and there has been. He didn't say there are going to be black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there have been several. He didn't say the percentage of the House would equal the percentage of black people in the population, and it does. He didn't say the 3 largest cities would have black mayors, and they do. He didn't say the largest and most prestigious organization of doctors, the American Medical Association, would have 2 black presidents, and there have been. He didn't say the most prestigious organization of lawyers, the American Bar Association, would have 2 black presidents, and they have. He said president, meaning at that point, I can feel that I've reached the mountaintop, which is the speech he gave right before he got assassinated the day before.
Now, again, let's kind of take a look at what King actually said, by the way, because remember, Larry Elder is a Republican, but here's what he says. I do think that the day will come in the not too distant future when the Negro vote itself will be powerful enough to be a coalition with liberals in the white communities and thereby elect a Negro president of the United States. So let's keep it in context what he said. Why did Barack, and by the way, we could almost consider this a prophecy because it came to pass exactly as Dr. King said. In other words, the Negro vote is a powerful vote, especially when you're talking about the electoral college where black people live. All of this kind of it came together during the campaign of Barack Obama. But notice it is not because of the Republican, as Larry Elders is, okay? But he says, King said, 1, the Negro vote as a powerful voting bloc, and it is even to this day. But notice he says with liberals in the white community, not with conservatives, because conservatives have always been anti-black, even the Christian ones. Let's continue.
And now we act as if Barack Obama never even got elected. And we're still talking about systemic racism. It's not fair. It's wrong. And you're discouraging black people from working hard. 1990.
Okay. First of all, who's discouraging black people from working hard? What he just said is a lie. No one discouraged black people from working hard. And I'll ask this question again. I'll put it like this. I'll ask the question. When people talk about that black people or conservatives say, you guys are playing the victims, what victimhood are we claiming? What are we saying, or what are you saying that we say we are victims of? Who said, by what Charlemagne or any of the liberals are saying, where has anyone been discouraged to work, not work? That's just nonsense. And of course, it is a stereotype, a mislabeling badly of what black people are. Now, certainly, okay, certainly, there is a segment of black people who are lazy, who live off of the government. But isn't that true in every community? As I said, there are more whites on welfare and food stamps than blacks. And I don't care how you want to shape it up from a percentage-wise, your complaint is spending the money. Okay? But the point is that in every now, by the way, and I'm just going to throw this out here, if you even go to the Native American community and look at some of the conditions, the stats there. It's just not a topic that people are talking about. All right, I'm going to pick this up in part 5. I'm going to pick this up in part 5 of Don't Bring Ignorance to a Debate, dissecting the Larry Elder's interview on the Breakfast Club. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. See you in part 5.